I can't answer this very complicated and difficult question, but I think in response to the question posed, I'm going to try and explain what I think AI means for future of capitalism and how we as socialists have to confront the side effects of this, what will happen to work, and how we can maybe start thinking of programmatic points that will defend the working class, not hinder progress of humanity, but at the same time deal with the many negative consequences of the way capitalism is using artificial intelligence. In general, there are, amongst the leftists, there are two types of approach when it comes to the future of capitalism and AI. The first group are in denial. They tell you, oh, this whole thing is massively hyped up. End of work will not happen because look at this large number of ghost workers that support AI, for example, Amazon, Google. I'll explain how they work later. They say work will change, but new jobs will be created. So if that's the case, there's nothing to worry about. I will address this right now because I think we have to remember that the new jobs it will create are fundamentally different to the kind of jobs it takes. And the kind of jobs it creates at the lower levels of the job market are extremely exploitative, far more than the jobs that it takes away in some way. And we'll see examples of that. These denialists will also tell you that capitalism is short-termist. They will not make sufficient investments in artificial intelligence. Basically, their argument is it will never happen. And in order to justify these 4 points, they quote Chapter 15 of Capital, the Marxist definition of machine. Machines are supplement to the value-generating power of labor. In this category of opinion, the conclusion is we don't need to do anything. We can ignore the subject. We don't need to talk about it, which in my view is a bit both in a denial of what is clearly happening around us, but also backward looking. It's not going to help anyone. The second group are the super optimists. They say the possibility of human emancipation, socialism will happen because of AI, and more importantly, there's no need for revolution because this is all going to smoothly transform itself, the ultimate disappearance of the wage form by automation. And I'm sure you are well aware of the people who promote this, Paul Mason, Aaron Bastani. There are American versions of this same argument. I'm not going to go through all the list. According to these people, the fourth industrial revolution will bring about the crisis of work. And this in its turn will bring the crisis of capitalism. At some stage, paid work will be replaced by universal pay. We will all be working a 12-hour week. If we wanted to, some of us won't even need to do that. And we will indulge in whatever fancies as arts, sports, creativity, and so on. Humans will be emancipated. The reality is neither of these two, not the denialist version, not this very optimistic and, if you like, rosy picture of AI changing everything. And there are political lines behind these two extremes that I mentioned. The reality is very much a mixture of this. It's a much more complicated picture. And that complicated picture has become, if you like, nuanced, not dramatically changed, but nuanced because of COVID and the pandemic. I think no one who has followed how companies are looking at employment will have any doubt that we are entering a situation where, if possible, every employer is trying to see if they can replace a task, a job, with automation. In some ways, even before COVID, we were looking at AI becoming part of the infrastructure. Some of it we don't even notice, the CCTV, the image recognition, on our phones. We unlock it with our faces or with our fingerprints or whatever. The autocorrect on typing, the spell checker, so many different forms that we don't see it as artificial intelligence, but a lot of investment, a lot of work has gone to create those. I'm going to argue that capitalist AI can be helping humanity in some areas, for example, medical science, in diagnostics, in creating data banks of genes in the genetic area of medicine, in creating vaccines, in helping, in creating devices that help the elderly, the disabled, but it has many, many shortcomings. The most important is that AI development is not transparent. It is often developing faster in areas that do not benefit humanity. It is moving very fast in the military sector, in advertising. Advertising is one of the major beneficiaries of artificial intelligence, this whole concept that you look up something and for weeks later, your email will send you adverts about what you looked for 3 weeks ago, is an example of that. And so much money, so much effort, so much labor goes into creating advertising AIs that humanity would have progressed a lot further if we didn't have advertising. It also plays an important role in the way stock markets work. As you know, it's now crucial in the way currencies are defined and so on, and shares are defined. And again, I think humanity doesn't need any of that, but there you are. These are the areas where investment goes. The negative sides I talked about really refer to job losses and the way these job losses are happening. And I don't think we should underestimate how this is working. So the World Economic Forum in 2020, I think late 2020, had this statement about the situation with artificial intelligence and robotics. And their statement is that smart machines will potentially replace a large proportion of existing human jobs. And here we have estimates. I'm not putting a lot of value on these estimates, but they are there and we can't ignore them. Currently, the assumption is that approximately 30% of all tasks are done by machines, and humans have the other 70%. But in 4 years' time, 2025, predictions are that we're looking at 50-50 human-machines combination. PricewaterhouseCoopers is saying that this will bring great economic benefits, of course, to major companies by 2030. And of course, it is true that some skilled jobs are being created, some retraining is being done. But writing software for artificial intelligence requires quite a lot of basic mathematics, apart from anything else, than code writing. And not everyone in the current education system is trained for either of those. None of the jobs that will disappear are just what we used to call blue-collar workers, factory workers, and so on. Banking, financial services, none of these jobs, in my opinion, are safe. All of these are on the cards to be automated. And there is no plan on what will happen to this as people lose jobs. They only seem to have the option of taking up even lower paid jobs, either as ghost support for IT on $2 an hour, that's in US, never mind if you do it from India, or as even the kind of service jobs that are very contractual, very easy to dismiss. Interestingly, there is the Chinese themselves estimates that 85 million jobs will be lost, and 50 million of these will be Chinese workers. And China is saying that these 50 million workers will require retraining. Now, in US, there has been some what we call retraining for blue-collar workers, but it is not what you would think of it as possible. So we have in Europe and in US, I'm sure a similar thing exists in China, what they call computer boot camps, where people are forced to learn new skills in order to operate the machines that are replacing the workers. However, you can see that for each of the jobs that is lost, I would say out of 4 jobs, 5 jobs, 1 person will be pressing a button on an automated machine. So this isn't going to, if 50 million jobs go, we are not going to have 50 million retrained workers who will be skilled technicians to run the automated new devices. Before I go further into the job losses, I think it's important to define what we refer to as artificial intelligence robotics, because there are quite a vast number of areas that, and a very, very different and very important differences between the 4 kinds of AIs that exist. It is important to know them because we live with 2 of them. We're more or less close to the 3rd one. The 4th one is still a long way away. So we first have the reactive machines, the ones that have been around, I would say, since the 1970s, maybe definitely 1970s, the early 70s, they were in factories. The paint machine, the ones that moves parts of a car, the ones that, if you like, automated conveyor belts. And for that, I think we have become used to those, and we've become used to the fact that people have lost jobs in those areas. Then we have the limited memory machines, and these are devices that remember events and data. I would say self-driving cars that use sensors in order to understand where they are, if the climate has changed, is it snowing now? That kind of device is this type of second type of decision-making based on interpreting sensory information. They do work. However, you have to remember that even here, we have not yet reached a situation where they are widely used. Accidents have stopped them, tragic death in one case, in a few cases, but also the whole development has issues. So, for example, anywhere in the world where the GPS exists and your satellite can tell you how to drive, these automated vehicles work fine. You take them to a countryside where usually a human being decides where it's going by negotiating areas, negotiating junctions, and so on. And the situation becomes far more difficult. Although now, using laser, some of these are moving between what I would call category 2 AIs to category 3 AIs. Category 3 AIs have a kind of theory of mind involved in them. So as humans, we don't drive just by looking at the road. We have thoughts, we have memories, we have many brain patterns that influence the way we drive, both on a main road, in a motorway, or in a country lane. And researchers who are involved in theory of mind work are trying to develop computers or artificial intelligence that can imitate this human mental model, i.e. machines that are capable of understanding how thoughts, and some say feelings, although I'm very, very suspicious about the second part, but thoughts, which is really a combination of memory, accumulated knowledge, brain patterns, and so on, can be used are used by humans and therefore can be programmed into algorithms. These algorithms are very complicated. They look at huge databases. At all times, they look at dynamic data. So humans make mistakes. The data with which this theory of mind machines are being operated is updated, hopefully quite soon, with that error factor. And here, I was very interested to hear what the radical anthropologists were saying. There are now computer scientists who've come to the conclusion that it's very hard to try and imitate the behavioral and the knowledge accumulated by an adult, normal, average intelligence human being. So instead, very often they concentrate on two types for this type of teaching of artificial intelligence. Either very young children who are beginning to get used to their surroundings and therefore start finding out about themselves, about their own body, their reflection in the mirror, the walls, the obstacles in a room, and so on. But interestingly enough, when it comes to collective work, because you can't program humans they're too complicated and too many factors and feelings and sentiments and so on become involved, they use ants as ways of predicting collective action and other animals. But so the studies are taking into account behavior, learning, cognitive recognition, and an accumulation of that allows writing software that will in some ways allow the artificial intelligent machine, robot, humanoid like Sophia, to respond to a particular situation. So it's easy to, if you like, write a software that tells Uber when the satellite says turn right, the voice from your machine says turn right, turn right. It's much more difficult to tell it to drive somewhere you've never been and detect that there's a junction and there's a car coming from the opposite side at 110 miles an hour. So this is the kind of teaching that I'm talking about. It's a very different type of thing from scenarios that are predicted scenarios. An example was the short video I was showing, Sophia from Hands-on Robotics. It's not the best example, but it's been on so many of these world forums, and they've deliberately chosen her to be a female. And they taking it to Saudi Arabia, I thought was real, more of a joke. It wasn't, it wasn't the best idea they can be. But Sophia's advantage is that she can reply to a question. So they haven't told her that no one is there pressing button for the questions the guy was asking her. She has been given enough information to respond, as I would say a very simple human being would respond to questions, but she has been given a lot of data. Amongst them, these stupid ideas that, we are promoting women, even though we are World Economic Forum's bastard child, and we are now in Saudi Arabia soon after an assassination of a journalist. So the way that she has been taught dictates how she responds. She's been taught liberal democracy, capitalist ideas, and with that, she goes ahead and responds accordingly. The last category, which is far more, if you like, advantageous, is self-aware machines. And in theory, these machines will have human-level consciousness, understand their own existence, and this is a long-term plan. An AI machine that has accumulated learning from events and can deduce how to react using that in future decision-making, not just in replying to a question you have given enough data for the robot to answer, but in any future situation. And I think here we are a very long way away. We haven't got into this fourth generation, this self-aware AI. We are nowhere near it. And that, I think, will be a fundamental change when we get to it. So in all of these four areas that I spoke about, we have what we call methods of teaching, and machine learning is the buzzword used by many people. It has very straightforward and the same, if you like, the same pattern applies to everything. So you develop models, you train the bot, and then you classify data. And at any time, the information is both based on, the reaction is based on the model, on the training, and the data. The predictions are, as you see it in your day-to-day life. So at times it works. Very often nowadays it is working because accumulated training has been based on what is called error correction. So at all times, the error correction helps builds a better situation. But at the same time, there are also errors that aren't predictable or are based on what we will look at later. The fact that all of these are very much influenced by what happens either in English-speaking Northern Hemisphere countries, but very often California and San Francisco in particular. So they affect how these learning techniques have been done. In terms of images, in terms of how machines react to images, we have what are nowadays very commonly used graphical processing units that can deal with matrices of information and transfer that information via still a central processing unit. But what you can see is the potentials that will exist if we ever move to quantum computing, because the speed with which that information will be transferred will dramatically change, the volume of data will change, and therefore the way you would train will change as well. So I talked about job losses earlier. I'm going to explain how capitalism has managed to organize this AI structure. And in some ways, this is important because in opposing capitalism's misuse of artificial intelligence, we should already start combating the way capitalism works. In many circumstances, we've turned a blind eye. We weren't maybe aware of where things were going when the first bell check arrived, but we should be aware now, and we should try and think of revolutionary ways to stop this, what I would call abolition of basic labor rights. In general, and this is why machine learning is so important to understand how machine learning works, every process that can be, every job, every task that can be reduced to a list of tasks with tick box, Excel spreadsheet, whatever, can be automated. And in our current world, this covers a lot of professions. It isn't just the working class in the factories, white collar workers who are workers, but they will be affected by this. And the way capitalism has done this is actually quite clever. They have dumbed down education. There is reducing people to single skill training. So you only learn one skill, you're not multi-skilled. Top-down management systems that ensures that you always have to do what the line manager says, or else you will lose your job. And in fact, the line manager who decides daily, at times hourly, at times minute by minute tasks. And that in itself creates, if you like, paves the way for the kind of automation. In some ways, driving is the obvious one, the job that will probably become driving as a job, as a taxi driver. So people think only talk of Uber in terms of the gig economy, the way it doesn't pay workers and so on. The reality is far worse than that. Uber is using its labor force, the drivers, basically to create models. Uber owned a company that was making self-driving cars. It's now the major shareholder, is one of the major shareholders in this Aurora, which is a self-driving car firm. But basically, all the data it collects, so the way its computers are related to Uber employees is to collect data about their mistakes, about the ways they work, the towns that are more beneficial, the areas that are more economically good. You try and get Uber at an area that isn't in this AI considered a, if you like, high-end bit or a high demand place, then the price goes considerably higher and then you can't find it anyway. So the way it works is exactly modeled on not just abusing the workers, refusing basic rights to them, but also it's using them basically as experimental drivers to accumulate its own data. I'm not sure if Ian talked about the advantage of the human driver as opposed to Deliveroo, but in that the human driver can play this role where it's still ahead of, if you like, an automated taxi, because in times when there's no job, it can go and do food delivery. And that in a way changes the relationship in terms of the way it can bring profit, i.e. its exploitation, the surplus value it can create for itself or for, and subsequently for Uber, is more than an automated machine who can't do that. Well, in the long term, that will also go because we are looking at, and Uber is looking at automation of a boot opening mechanism where without human intervention, you can go and get delivery via automated taxi. So quite a lot of the jobs of the gig economy are also themselves in danger. They're part of this development, but they're also in danger. And it is true that what the, if you like, the denialists say that, of course, some jobs go, some other jobs come. But the pattern we are seeing is increasingly polarizing work. How is it doing this? Well, not many people, as I said before, have had the opportunity of going to schools that equip them with, everyone can do mathematics, everyone can do code writing, but they haven't been prepared for this, so they can't become software developers. What we have is jobs disappearing, even in the low-paid delivery, Uber driver, gig economy, and going into an even lower paid job, ghost workers. So who are the ghost workers? Most of the major internet companies, Amazon, Crowdflower, Microworkers, all of these, use low-paid ghost workers. MTurk is named after an 18th century automaton that won chess games in Europe, only to be exposed later to actually be a human. With unemployment soaring, there is no shortage for people who would work as MTurk Amazon workers. So what do these people do? They correct the mistakes that the artificial intelligence does. The website makes a mistake, it gets the wrong address for you, this is the one that intervenes and either is available there as what they call online chat, or is actually checking various, so you've put the wrong card and the stupid computer hasn't, I mean, computers are now good at reading card numbers, but something you've put that doesn't fit, this MTurk corrects it. And most of these are paid very, very low paid wages. So we have, you also see this in supermarkets. There is a whole range of, increasingly I see that the actual checkpoints are closing. There is more and more, some of the supermarkets hardly have any checkpoints now, the smaller ones. You only have the machines. But instead of 5, 6 people working there, there's one person or maximum 2, and their task is to correct what the machine can't do. But the machines are improving. The machines are doing a lot better than they did a year ago, and definitely a lot better than they did 2 years ago. So you can see how the pattern is changing. So I've talked about how the new jobs that are being created are actually far worse than the gig economy jobs. I now want to pay a bit of attention also to what I would call the social and political interventions of AI. And here we have to remember that the problems that exist, both in terms of quite a lot of people complain that spell checkers, if you put a name that isn't an Anglo-Saxon name, it tries and convert it to an English word, which is true. You try and put a Farsi Persian name into a spell checker on an iPhone, and it will try and convert it to a word. And the same is true of all these people who complain about artificial intelligence data regarding face recognition, name recognition, all sorts of artificial intelligence. For this, we can't blame the computer or the software or the logic. We can only blame the humans who created this condition. But this is also an area where the left has to pay attention, because obviously, if you feed neoliberal capitalist data to Sophia, that's the rubbish she comes up with in Saudi Arabia. If you do teach her intelligent radical thought, she will come up with radical thought. So we can't blame the technology. It's the way capitalism is using artificial intelligence. Now, because artificial intelligence has appeared to be quite sexist in terms of women's rights and so on. There is a lot of debate about it. There's a lot of research going on about it and so on. But there's nothing, absolutely nothing about the fact that the entire AI industry, led by white males, often, or Indian, Asian males, is also extremely pro-capitalist, it's colonialist, it's pro-imperialist, it's pro-war, and it's the humans that have made artificial intelligence there. So as leftists, we have to be very well aware of that. Sorry, I'm a bit going through various things, but I just want to briefly talk about the jobs that are going to be lost still, because my last bit is about how to combat job losses. And what can we do proposal-wise in terms of job losses? So one of the jobs that will go, and we now know, I've tested some things that I will talk about in a minute, is translation. Translation as a job will disappear, I would say, by 2025 as a full-time job. It might not be working for someone who's doing historical Marxist text. I assume it might not, but for most, if you like, day-to-day translation, it will go. You can now, in spring of 2022, you will be able to buy something that I recently tested, $103 earphones. You put it in your ear. Someone talks to you in a language you don't know. In less than 1 minute, 5 seconds, in a few seconds, you get, it really literally is a few seconds. I'm not exactly sure how many, but in a few seconds, you hear it in English. I did French to English. Someone talked to me in French and I heard English and it was perfect, exactly correct. And the right accent and the right intonation. So this is $103 earphone. Okay, it's not going to be available for everyone. I still might not be able to talk to the wonderful Portuguese lady who is working in the department, but it will be available for a lot of other tasks. In translation, we could say there isn't much we could have done, or as in the same way that in transcribing, we couldn't do much. It is it's very time-consuming. Machines are doing it better. Machines have learned about it. And in some ways, maybe it will help evolve the job, make translations more. What this translation can't do is book translation, I assume, because it requires so much more human input into the work. But in terms of translation, it will work. But there are jobs that are being automated and are being automated because we have accepted capitalism's way of progressing these jobs. And amongst them is news reporting, for example. You will know that, for example, the Washington Post uses a program that covers stories that staff are unable to cover. Associated Press has the similar setup. I'm sure BBC has exactly the same. One reason why this can happen is that we hardly have any investigative journalists. Journalists repeat each other's dogma. There is an echo chamber of what the media wants to hear. It's usually a center-right ideology. And as a result of it, they might have a slightly different reaction to the same headline, but they've all picked up the same stories. They're all talking about the same thing. There is no radicalism. There is no thirst, no eagerness to achieve truth, no attempt to think beyond the limits of this echo chamber. And that's why journalist jobs, in my opinion, are going to go. Quite a lot of them will go. There will be bots, there'll be someone reading it with a lot of camera and light and whatever, but the actual journalist job doesn't seem to have much future. And in some ways, you could say that a lot of, and here I'm trying to see why we should have rejected these. HR tasks in most companies have now become automated. There are software packages. I think Oxford says you can do your HR online. And in some ways it works. You know, you tick a box, it automatically emails the person who has to know you're going to take a holiday or whatever, and it works. The problem is that originally, when they did change personnel to human resources, the idea was that these people would use their brains, their feelings, their sentiments, their humanity to make that was the way it was sold by capitalism and the way business schools were teaching it. It was supposed to create this category of people who will help you do better for the company to get more profits for the boss. But in some ways, they have become automated. And we have, if you like, moved very smoothly into these automated jobs because we didn't oppose the lack of humanity, the lack of, as in journalism, we didn't resist and oppose the fact that there was no investigative journalism. In HR jobs, we just ignored that and allowed it to happen. And the software that has been developed in the last decades, I would say, has dumbed down a lot of tasks and has paved the way for this situation where a number of white-collar jobs, a number of jobs that require a human with more than just a robotic response to a situation to deal with it. And I think that's very true of jobs that will be lost. And here, luckily, I think quite a lot of extra jobs that were really created by capitalism in the first part of the 21st century will also go. You know, things like project managers, IT administrators, a lot of peripheries that nowadays a good software can easily replace. However, none of the people who have these jobs again are going to become software developers. They're going to become unemployed. They are either going to be ghost workers or they are going to be unemployed. And what we can foresee in that situation is what some people are predicting in future, where, for example, truck drivers will oppose the automated cars, and there will be confrontation between these two. We will see the ghost workers rebelling. There is a campaign in San Francisco by ghost workers called Google F Off. And these are the kind of campaigns we should be ready to hear about, to work with, and maybe to support at times. But I think our response has also got to be more in terms of program, in terms of what can be done now to stop aspects of these. And in this, I would say, one of the issues we should oppose, and we should continue to oppose, is the kind of education that kids are facing, because these are the people who will be made unemployed, who will be left with ghost jobs. And I still don't see any changes in that. The fact that this syllabus is being reduced to simplistic historic events, the fact that mathematics isn't taught properly, that science remains for a few rather than the majority as a choice, as something they can evolve in, will create problems. And it is that generation that will face the worst part of the unemployment that we can foresee in the current situation. There is also the monitoring that goes with jobs. We should oppose that level of monitoring. This monitoring is allegedly done, well, it's done for profits, there is no doubt, but it's also part of the whole concept of automation. So in China, they're doing it very well. They are, even if you're chopping wood, they're monitoring every action of your arm. And this is obviously so that later they can program a robot to do this. But a lot of it is happening elsewhere. So this constant monitoring of jobs, we should oppose. We should also oppose, in my opinion, the kind of management structure that is now taken for granted, that every job, with the exception of some universities, not even all universities, but every job has a line manager who dictates hourly tasks in a list. And at the end of the month or the week or the day, depending on the type of job you do, you have to present your that you have accomplished these goals. This, in a way, is machine learning. They're using you as the mice for the experiments that later will help automate your job. Refuse to do it. Build campaigns to oppose it. Don't become part of the, I'm going to become a line manager and then I will, because above you there'll be dozens of other line managers and they're going to ruin your life in the long term. In terms of the way AI influences politics and social media, we have to take measures, we have to take steps. So the way AI is working now, it's stopping advertising, for example, of anything left of center, I would say, and especially if it involves Palestine, God forbid, on social media. And the way this is done is names are within an algorithm. The computer picks up that name or picks up that word, and that's it. It stops. And the human who is involved has no authority to overrule some of these, even if he or she decides that this is not the case. We also face a situation where AI is being programmed in terms of used and misused. I mean, we know already that quite a lot of the Brexit publicity, the Trump election, probably Biden's election, but any election process has quite a lot of intervention by both bots, but all bots that intervene in social media. And again, capitalism owns these platforms, but we must wage campaigns to stop the development, the increasing power of these types of systems. We should oppose the fact that management and capitalism and the techniques that business schools, departments of economics in universities and so on have followed for the last decades. I would say long before neoliberal capitalism. And that is active propagation of dehumanized, in addition, I think I'll summarize now. And I would say that we need to start building campaigns to support workers who are, for any reason, fighting the excesses of AI companies. That's mainly the ghost workers. So we need to be with them as opposed to consider them people who are against progress. They are not against progress. They are the victims of this situation. We should oppose the casualizations and the way this gig economy has increased the ability of the employer for zero contract is part of that same process. We should be against surveillance of workers. So when we hear that people are carrying webcams on their bodies to monitor every action, every movement they've done, that's it's not just an infringement of their rights. It's also the fact that this is part of what I was saying, dumbing down, making the process into the task into lists of processes and so on. On a political level, we must wage campaigns that take on these large companies that are feeding us false information. They are feeding us false news at times, and there might come a time when this will become the norm as opposed to just the odd false news information. And we have to have campaigns that deal with the way data is being fed for artificial intelligence. It isn't just gender bias. The main issue, as far as I can see, is class bias. And that is how capitalism will use AI against the interests of the working class. Because of all of this, we need transparency in artificial intelligence development. As I said before, quite a lot of this remains a mystery to a large section of the population. A large section of the population doesn't want to know, seems to think that it's beyond their capabilities. These are very simple, basic facts that affect daily life. We should make sure everyone is aware of those facts, and we must demand transparency in the development of artificial intelligence, robotics. So I'll finish here and wait for the questions. Thanks.